a short presentation, and then after the presentation, I'll be available for questions and answers. And yeah, with that, let's go ahead. So I'll share my screen. And I'm hoping that everybody can see the presentation. I'll take that as a yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, so what we're going to go over today, so we're going to look at 6 things. So we're going to talk about the goals and the purpose of the plastic waste reduction regulations, why we're here today. Then we're going to review some policy details of what the ordinances may consist of. Delve in a little bit to the stakeholders who the policy will pertain to. And then we want to get some feedback and your ideas on an exemption process that we're going to incorporate into the policy. Then we're going to talk a little bit about the timelines, what's going to happen between now and the end of the year regarding this project. And then finally talk about a few implementation resources that we hope to develop. So why are we here today? Why are we looking at developing plastic waste reduction regulations? There's a number of reasons. First of all, you may or may not know that not all plastics get recycled. So there's a lack of recycling of certain plastics. So unfortunately, a lot of plastics do still end up in landfill. And that is something that we're trying to avoid. To support our clean communities, we're actually trying to look at this through a health and safety lens. Plastics, and especially PFAS chemicals that within plastics, can have, according to the EPA and other studies, certain detrimental effects to human health. So we feel it's from a health and safety perspective, it's a good idea for us to try and reduce the amount of plastics within our society, and especially food and beverage foodwares. It's also about preventing pollution and lessening the amount of new materials used. As you all know, plastics derived from the petrochemical industry and from the refining process of the industry. So we're extracting virgin oil and everything to create new plastics all the time. So we want to try to see how we can do that. The city, as a strategy regarding sustainability, is trying to go down a path of decarbonization. So reducing the amount of plastics that we use within our city helps us achieve some of those goals. Again, there's a huge amount of greenhouse gas associated with plastic within manufacturing, transportation, and processing of plastics. Some of the research that we have done and some of the case studies that we have looked at indicate that using reusable items can sometimes work out cheaper than constantly purchasing more plastics. So we feel there may be an advantage to food and beverage providers who move away from single-use plastics. And finally, the numbers. The numbers are huge. Almost 11 million tons of plastic enters the ocean every year. In California alone, we throw away a huge amount of plastics every day. And even though we are not a coastal city, our drainage systems do end up going to the coast. And a lot of these plastics end up on our beaches. And we're always doing cleanup on our beaches and entering the ocean and entering the Pacific garbage patch. And finally, getting eaten by fish and everything. So these microplastics end up in the food chains. So we feel there's a real opportunity here to reduce the environmental impact of plastics by the city addressing this issue and trying to reduce the amount of plastics within our system, within our society. So the goals of the regulations that we're thinking about putting together are, as I said, to minimize the use of plastics, single-use plastics. We also really want to encourage reuse. There is a lot happening around the reuse arena, and we think there's lots of possibilities going forward for the idea of reuse to grow. So with these regulations, we want to kind of encourage the whole reuse culture. And this is really important. We really want to develop these regulations with the feedback from the community. So it's not only the community that uses these items on a daily basis, but really importantly from those food and beverage providers in our community who these regulations will potentially pertain to. We are not food and beverage providers. We don't understand your operations. We don't know how your operations work. So in order for us to develop regulations that can be applied and that can be implemented successfully, we really need your input. So that's part of this outreach process. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that towards the end of the presentation of how I'm going about getting your feedback into the development of these regulations. And then finally, once we do develop these regulations, how can we support organizations? How can we give them time to implement the regulations? How can we give them time to get used to these regulations? So how can we support you in being successful so hopefully we develop and implement these regulations. So that's why we're here today. So we are not the only people doing this. From the state level, there's definitely a push to try and reduce plastics, and outlined here are some of the Assembly Bill and State Bill regulations that pertain to that. For example, Assembly Bill 619, which was passed in July 2019, explicitly allows reusable food containers to be refilled by either the owner-operator of a food facility or the consumer. And consumers may supply their own reusable containers, and facilities may accept return containers from the consumers for reuse. So as I mentioned earlier, I think the state recognizes that reuse within the system is really valuable, and they're trying to lay out regulations that make that easier for both the food and beverage provider and also the consumers. SB 54, which is a new bill, packaging law that requires by 2032, 100% of packaging in the state to be recycled or compostable. There to be a 25% cut of plastic packaging, and for 65% of all single-use plastic packaging to be recycled. So again, the state recognizes that dealing with plastic is a big issue for the state, and they're trying to put in regulations to how we can reduce the amount of plastics and recycle more plastics. Recently, Assembly Bill 1200 that began the 1st of January this year prohibits any persons from distributing, selling, or offering for sale in the state any food packaging that contains regulated PFAS, those forever chemicals, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later on. And AB 1276 prohibits food facilities from providing any single-use foodware accessory or standard condiment to a consumer unless requested by the consumer. And the City of Glendale also has regulations that are very similar to that. And then finally, Assembly Bill 827 requires businesses starting July 2020 to provide customers with easily accessible recycling and organics collection bins to collect these materials from products purchased on the premises. So as you can see, the state recognizes the importance of dealing with plastic waste, and I think these regulations are going to continue to increase. Also, I think over 100 cities or jurisdictions in California have adopted some type of plastic waste regulations. And that accounts to, we have plastic waste reduction regulations covering around about 18 million people in our state. So it's fairly widespread that jurisdictions and cities, again, are adopting these type of regulations. So we're certainly not the first. And in fact, we're playing a little bit of catch up in developing these regulations. So I think that's why Council wants us to develop these regulations and to get feedback from the community as we do develop these regulations. So the key stakeholders that these regulations will pertain to will be food and beverage providers, but also foodware vendors such as suppliers, convenience stores, etc., and also the City of Glendale. The city itself and our own operations will be subject to these regulations as we develop them and as we begin to put them in place. So we have done some outreach into the community. We have a poll that's been, a survey that's been up for a couple of months now. We constantly try to direct people to that survey, to advertise that survey. We have visited a number of food and beverage providers to talk to them about these regulations. We understand that we need to, and we will be visiting a lot more going forward. and hopefully we'll maybe doing some more of these types of webinars. But some of the feedback from the survey is fairly interesting. We have like the view of the residences and the view of the businesses, and sometimes they don't quite coincide. So residents seem to feel that the city the city needs to reduce single-use plastic foodware. 80% of residents or certain respondents to the survey think Glendale should prohibit single-use plastic foodware. And 91% of those responding to the survey said Glendale should prohibit styrofoam products in particular. We've also had a number of businesses respond to the survey, and we're very grateful for that, and we want to encourage that. So you have any of your colleagues in the business who haven't responded to the survey, please ask them to do so. We continually want to collect this data, so when we go to City Council with reports, we can reflect on what we feel is the outlook of the business community on this. But 57% agree that it's important to reduce polystyrene and single-use plastics in landfill as litter. A number of businesses, a high percentage, are concerned with the costs of alternative products to plastic products. 70% are concerned with the cost for reusable dining, which is one of the policy points that we're going to talk about, specifically having to get dishwashers or staffing. 85% businesses are concerned with customer reaction to 25% cup charge, 25-cent cup charge, which we're going to talk about in a minute. However, 60% of businesses do support us having a polystyrene ban, and 71% of businesses are already trying to reduce single-use plastics within their operations. So I think the purpose of us developing these regulations with the community, as I said earlier, is to develop regulations which are feasible and implementable and make sense to everybody. We're very, very conscious that we want to do that as we go ahead with these regulations. So what are we talking about? What are the regulations going to look like? So the way we've looked at this is almost like there's two sets of regulations. The first one is a polystyrene ban. This is something that City Council has kind of directed us to develop an ordinance banning the use of polystyrene products. And I'll talk about that in a minute. The second one is regarding additional plastic waste reduction regulations. So this is something that Council has asked us to explore and get feedback on, and to develop these regulations about how far we should go in reducing single-use plastics and what is acceptable to our business community as we develop these regulations. So part of this feedback is like, for businesses that basically, no, we don't want any of these types of regulations. And we're trying to move away from that. We're trying to say, let's develop these regulations together that will help achieve our sustainability goals and council goals. So this is where we really want your feedback as we develop these regulations, so these plastic waste reduction regulations. So let's look at the polystyrene prohibition. Again, polystyrene products, they're very, very hard to recycle, and there's very few recycling facilities, especially in California and Southern California, that actually recycle these types of products. So we're talking about polystyrene products in particular. So that is the number 6 you'll often see on a couple of polystyrene products that indicate it to be as such. Also, we recognize that there is a lot of alternatives to polystyrene products that are on the market that are cost comparable and that food and beverage providers can use. So in essence, with these regulations, what we're saying is no food and beverage provider shall use, distribute, or sell any polystyrene foodware in the conjunction with the sale of prepared food, raw food, or beverages at any location within the city. No persons that shall sell or distribute any polystyrene foodware or polystyrene coolers at any location within the city. So that mainly applies to supermarkets and those types of stores. So we're not talking about a polystyrene cooler that's encased. We're just talking about those white polystyrene coolers that you sometimes see on top of the shelves in supermarkets ready for sale. No vendor in the city sell, distribute, or use polystyrene packaging materials, including but not limited to foam peanuts, packing peanuts, foam popcorn, or packing noodles within the city. So these types of items here that we want to get rid of too. No person may sell, distribute, or use in the city any meat and/or fish trays or produce trays or egg cartons made in whole or in part from polystyrene. So we really want to try and eliminate this product from a city as much as possible. And again, there are many alternatives to using these types of products. So we actually have a poll question here. So bear with me while I get this up. Oops, sorry about that. Okay. So we're going to launch our first poll. Can anybody see that poll? Yes, I assume so.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, so if you could enter in your response to the poll, we'll give it a minute and we'll see what the results are.
You can also find the poll in the chat function if you're having issues seeing it on your screen. It should be available in the chat.
Should we give it one more minute? And then let's see what the results are. So of the people here today, 67% do not currently use polystyrene products, which is the kind of feedback that we've been getting in general. So that's great. Thank you very much for that. And we'll go back to the presentation now. Okay. So as I said, this polystyrene prohibition is we're developing that ordinance, and as I've just read out, we will be submitting that ordinance to City Council for their consideration towards the end of the year. Now we're going to talk about these other waste reduction regulations. So you can think of this as something that we would like to do, something that we want to do, but this is where we really need your feedback on the feasibility of these, shall we say, expanded polystyrene or plastic waste reduction regulations. So the first area we're going to look at is prohibition on the use and distribution of single-use plastic straws, stirrers, and utensils. Why are we singling out these products? For a number of reasons. Regarding pollution, these types of products are the products that you often find polluting our beaches, impacting flora and fauna, and ending up in the ocean. Another reason we're targeting these products is there is plenty of alternative products to straws, to stirrers, to utensils, which we think are close in cost to the single-use plastic varieties. And in fact, I just had a meeting with some gentleman the other day who makes a paper straw, and he was mentioning to me that they've now gotten the manufacturing costs down to the same as plastic straws. So there's a lot happening in this arena. There's a lot more products coming on all the time. So we think it's ideal to address these items. And also, as I said earlier on, these items, we have this legislation, regulations already in the city where if a customer comes to you or comes to your store for takeout and everything, you shouldn't be giving out these items without a specific request from the customer. So the customer said, I need a straw, I want a straw, I want a knife and fork. so we shouldn't be giving them out without that customer request. So what are we saying here? So food and beverage providers shall not use, distribute plastic straws, stirrers, or utensils, whether for use on site, to go, or delivery. Disposable straws, stirrers, and utensils must be non-plastic and made from non-plastic materials such as paper, pasta, sugarcane, bamboo, wood, or other non-plastic items. And we do recognize that we need a user accommodation regarding this product. So food and beverage providers citywide may retain and dispense plastic straws available upon request as accommodation to people with disabilities in order to provide equal access to food and beverage service providers within the city. So we have a poll regarding this too. So let's look at this poll. So providing alternatives to plastic straws, stirrers, and utensils. So let's launch this poll and get your ideas and your feedback on this. So what are some of the issues that you may face as a food and beverage provider to providing alternatives to plastic straws, stirrers, and utensils? So I'll give you a minute or two to put in your thoughts. Okay, let's see what the results are here. So product quality, the performance of alternatives, getting these products, supply or sourcing, and cost of alternatives. They seem to be about the same amount. And then customer satisfaction. Well, the customer's not used to using alternatives to plastics. So again, those responses fit in with some of the responses that we've received from our survey. So let's go back to the presentation. I don't know why it keeps taking me to the beginning. Anyway. So the next item that we propose that may be part of these regulations is establishing disposable foodware regulations. So what we're talking about here is those items that you would give out. So you're making sandwiches, a person comes to your location to take out. Instead of giving them plastic containers to take out, we'd want to move away from plastic and move towards providing non-plastic containers. So what we're saying is that the containers that would be provided must be BPI or other third-party certified as PFAS-free, and that no traditional or bioplastics should be used in these type of, shall we say, take-out to-go containers. So what we're looking at is to encourage the use of fiber-based products and aluminum-based products that can be either to wrap food, contain food, or provide food for people to go out with. So disposable foodware and disposable foodware accessories shall be disposed of at the city collection programs. And disposable foodware and disposable foodware accessories shall be certified as free of all PFAS chemicals by the Biodegradable Products Institute or other third-party certifying organization. Non-compostable food wrappers that are accepted in the city's recycling collection programs may be used for food items that require foil or aluminium to contain the food items. As part of these regulations, the city would and shall maintain on its website a list of suppliers that sell these disposable foodware and disposable foodware accessories that comply with these foodware standards. And also, we're going to talk about this a little bit later on, there will be an opportunity for food and beverage providers to request an extension or exemption from this particular part of the regulations. So our research indicates that a lot of jurisdictions and cities are moving towards this fiber-based approach. Again, for the reasons that we began this conversation today, as we want to move away from the amount of single-use plastics that are used, that are in our waste streams, that we have to process, and also the health and safety issues associated with some of the single-use plastics. So we understand that this is fairly a progressive approach, but again, we really want to get your feedback and your thoughts on this as we go forward with this. So we have another poll regarding this particular item. Sorry, we don't have a poll for that particular item. It's very similar to the single-use plastics. I don't know why that keeps happening. I apologize for that. Okay, so the next possible item we're going to have in these regulations is regarding a disposable cup charge. This is again where we want to institute this disposable cup charge to try and encourage people to reuse cups or to have reusable cups that they can collect or have their beverages in, and again move away from single-use plastics. So food and beverage providers shall charge customers 25 cents for every disposable cup provided. Income from the disposable cup charge shall be retained by the food and beverage providers for the purposes of funding compliance with these waste reduction regulations. Food and beverage providers shall separately identify charges for disposable cups on any post-sale receipt provided. Food and beverage providers shall identify disposable cup charge on any menu, ordering platform, and/or menu board. Food and beverage providers shall inform customers placing telephone orders of the disposable cup charge. So we have a poll regarding these disposable cup charges. So we'd like to get your thoughts on this. So I'll give you a minute to give us your thoughts on this item. Right, let's see what the results are on this. Customer satisfaction, which we fully understand, staff training consistency, and oversight of the program are the big ones that people are concerned about. In our research, what we have found is that a lot of jurisdictions, instead of imposing the 25-cent cup charge, are putting in their regulations that food and beverage providers should accept reusable cups and everything. So, as I said, we really want to get your feedback on this particular item and how we present this to council. So the last item in these regulations is regarding reusable foodware for dining on premises. The purpose of this section of the regulations is to move away from if somebody is dining on premises and they get escorted to the table and they get the food delivered to the table, they get served at the table, is to move away from restaurants using single-use plastics for this dining experience. And we really want to push that they should be using reusable cutlery, reusable glasses, reusable plates and everything for that dining experience. So within these regulations, prepare food or raw food or beverages served for consumption on the premises of food and beverage providers shall only be served using reusable foodware. except that disposable paper food wrappers, sleeves, and bags, foil wrappers, paper napkins, and straws may be allowed as long as they meet the disposable foodware standards that we talked about earlier. Again, we recognize that not all establishments will be able to have the space or afford dishwashers or contract out for dishwashing services. So we're putting space in here for that, where food and beverage providers that do not have on-site or off-site dishwashing capacity or are unable to contract for services to wash, rinse, and sanitize reusable foodware in compliance with the California Health and Safety Code may request an extension or exemption from this particular part of the regulations. Where the food and beverage providers must demonstrate the inability to comply due to insurmountable space constraints, undue financial hardships, and/or other extraordinary insurmountable circumstances. So again, we recognize that there is circumstances. The other day, I was meeting a number of food and beverage providers at the Glendale Galleria within their food court. And for example, in those food courts, those space constraints in which those operations operate is very limited to the amount they can take orders, cook, and serve. And they have no room for dishwashers. So an example like that, they would be exempt from this part of the ordinance. So we do recognize that, not everybody will be able to comply. We want to provide that exemption process for that. So those are the 4 areas that we are looking to develop the regulations to reduce the amount of single-use plastic within our community. And I know that's a lot of information, and we will have room for questions and answers after this. So just got a couple more slides to go through, and then we can enter into the discussion phase. As mentioned, we do want to and are trying to develop a fair and equitable exemption process so people who are unable to comply with these regulations have a way to inform us that they're unable to apply, and that we, as I said, we can have this fair and transparent exemption process. So we're talking about an exemption with undue hardship. So where no alternatives to single-use plastics exists, where an alternative to single-use plastics is unavailable at a commercially reasonable price. We'll talk about commercially, what that means, commercially reasonable price. Where compliance with these regulations is unduly burdensome to the food and beverage provider, or regulations would go against food and safety laws. So where these regulations would go against food and safety laws, there'd be an exemption for that too. So for this exemption process, we feel, as I said, developing a transparent and equitable exemption process will provide. The best way to do that is for the food and beverage providers to provide us financial information. So what we propose is to be exempt from the proposed regulations. The organizations requesting the exemption would have to show an economic hardship and to meet one of the following criteria. Where the business experienced a net loss of net income by 15% from the previous year, or increased costs are expected to result in at least a 5% increase of business operating costs, or increased costs are expected to result in a reduction of at least 5% in operating profits, or where the increased costs are expected to be greater than or equal to the annual salary of at least 1 employee, or where the biodegradable, compostable, recyclable product may cost up to 15% more than the non-compliant product. So we feel that this exemption process would allow food and beverage providers to say that we want to comply, but this will have too much of an adverse impact on the business. And here's the evidence as to say why it would have this adverse impact on our business. We take those considerations and then the exemption would potentially be given to the person applying. Also, we recognize that this is not something that we can ask food and beverage providers to do immediately, or the supermarkets or stores, whoever these potential regulations apply to. So should we adopt a phased-in approach? So we think so. We think that businesses that are 26+1, so what we recognize as a larger employer or chain restaurants, would have potentially 1 year to get into compliance with the ordinance. So if the ordinance does go to City Council and City Council chooses to adopt this ordinance, say they choose to adopt it January 1, 2024, businesses would have until January 1, 2025 to be in compliance. So it's businesses of 26+1. For businesses of 26 and under, which we consider small businesses, they would have a 1 year grace period. So in essence, you'd have 2 years to potentially comply with the regulations. We feel that this phased-in approach provides the businesses and the food and beverage providers the opportunity to understand the regulations, to get up to speed with the regulations, to potentially use any product that they currently have. So we don't expect people to say, well, I've just purchased X amount of product that's going to supply me for the next 6 months. We will not say we can't use that. We say, no, run through that product and you have 1 or 2 years to comply with the regulations. So we think a phased-in approach is probably the fairest approach. And that's a recommendation that we will be making to City Council. So what are the next steps? And again, I'll be done speaking in 1 minute. So we're actually going to hire a consultant to help us continue with our outreach. So they should be coming on board in the next couple of weeks. And their charge will be to go out and speak to the individual businesses within the City of Glendale about these regulations, get their feedback, get their concerns, and understand the concerns and document all those concerns. And as we get those concerns in, or whether positive or negative, we'll develop the regulations and we'll provide that feedback to the City Council based on what we hear. And we are presenting and developing a list of suppliers that do have alternative products. And we're beginning the process of reaching out to different suppliers and maybe trying to put on a supplier fair the first quarter of 2024. So bringing suppliers to Glendale who do have these alternative products, so the food and beverage providers can meet those suppliers or meet those product manufacturers. One thing that we're fairly excited about is we're actually convening a food and beverage providers feedback group. So we're looking for 2 representatives from large businesses, 2 representatives from medium, 2 representatives from small businesses. And this group of 6 are going to work closely with myself. So as we develop these regulations, as we write them, we're going to bounce them off this group of food and beverage providers who are going to be able to provide us guidance on like, this is possible, this is not possible, this is how far you can go with these regulations, this is how far we recommend you go. So we really want to make sure that we have that dialogue with our food and beverage providers as we are developing these regulations. So if you're interested in being part of that convening group, please email me and let me know. I'll give you my email contacts at the end of the presentation. Or if you have any colleagues in the business who you think would like to participate in this group, please let me know. This will be a time limited, it'll be maybe 4 to 6 meetings maximum, just as we develop these regulations. So as I said, we're very excited to have this group and help us develop this. And again, we're trying to find case studies and research all the time and provide that information on our website for those food and beverage providers who may not have had reusable before, maybe concerned about reusable items. We're just trying to provide the evidence where other food and beverage providers in your same position have made the switch and what that has meant to their businesses. So in terms of timeline, we are going to continue our outreach through September to November of this year. And that is conducting surveys, doing the site visits, putting together this convening group, and doing these types of webinars if this is something that people find useful. We hope to draft the regulations in November. So we're going to probably draft 2 sets of regulations, the polystyrene wide and then the plastic waste reduction regulations. And then we anticipate, and this may change, this may bleed over into January, February 2024, but we hope to go to City Council either at the end of this year or at the beginning of next year with these regulations. Again, we have the survey out. We encourage everybody to please take the survey. If you have your colleagues in the business, please ask them to take the survey if they haven't taken it. The more we can hear back from people, we think the more robust the regulations will be and the more reflective the regulations will be of what your businesses can do and how they can implement these different regulations. So it's really important that we do here. And then finally, I just want to touch on this one thing. The city is developing a climate action adaptation plan. We're going to be doing a lot of outreach and having community workshops on this. So we encourage you to go to this website and learn more at glendaleca.gov/CAAP about numerous workshops we have upcoming on this program that the city is implementing. Again, my name is David Jones. My email is djones@glendale.ca.gov. And my telephone number is 818-548-4844. Please, please, please contact me regarding your thoughts on these regulations. We'll take all that information, and as we prepare staff reports, we'll make sure that your thoughts, your ideas, and your reflections on these regulations are incorporated and represented in what we present to council as we develop these staff reports. And with that, I will stop presenting and I will try and respond to as many questions as you may have. If I can't answer the question right now, I will make sure that I will get back to you with the answer to those questions. So yeah, you probably had enough from me. So yeah, please. Kathy.
Thank you, Dave, for that really comprehensive summary of all the upcoming changes that Glendale is planning to make. I am a lawyer in Washington, D.C., but I represent a few restaurants in Glendale. And one of our major concerns is that we've seen with disposable foodware regulations is that a lot of ordinances prohibit traditional or bio-based plastics. But for us, it gets a little confusing because under SB 54, California state law, SB 54 bans the use of plastic coatings on fiber-based products, which is used in these straws that are provided or marketed as alternatives to single-use plastics. So that's just something I want to raise with Glendale as this ordinance is being drafted. Yeah.
Great, thank you. We recognize that too. So we have been in discussions with the Biodegradable Products Institute, Glendale Against Waste, to speak to them about that and to get some guidance from them on those issues. But as I said at the beginning of the regulations, it's focused on reducing the amount of single-use plastics as much as we can, recognizing that yes, some of those fiber-based products are lined with a coating, but again, some are not, or and then there's new products coming in line, fiber-based products coming in line all the time that have different coatings. But yes, we do recognize that.
I have a second question as well,
Go ahead.
if no one else. So regarding the polystyrene prohibition that Glendale is considering, would this also apply to reusable polystyrene, rigid polystyrene? So not your foam polystyrene, but things like school lunch trays that are made of hard polystyrene plastic, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so it would, yes, both types of polystyrene.
Got it. Thank you very much.
Any other questions? Okay. As again, we'll have this webinar on our website. You have my contact details. Please, as I said earlier, please reach out to me if you've got any questions or concerns. And as we continue to do the outreach, as we come and visit your establishments and everything, you will have the opportunity to provide us your feedback. And so as we come and see you, please take the opportunity to speak to us and give us your thoughts. So,
David, before we
yes,
go, one thing,
sure.
this is Corey with Joselitos.
Hey, Corey.
My question for you, if you're going to have the polystyrene prohibited, why are you going to charge 25 cents if we get something that is not polystyrene?
So the 25-cent cup charge, that is for single-use cups. That's separate from the polystyrene. So polystyrene, whatever it is, will be banned. Other plastics or other single-use items, single-use cups, we would charge at 25 cents, and that 25 cents would go back to the businesses.
What if the cup is actually compostable though?
So again, we would still charge that 25 cents, and it's not something that we're going to do. We want to get the feedback from the community, but the direction we've been given to council is to ask and find out about this 25-cent cup charge, if there's something that is feasible or not feasible to implement within the city of Glendale.
Yeah, that doesn't make sense to me, but okay. I got it. All right, thank you.
Have a 25-cent charge. Why?
So the
What
reason,
is the concern? Yeah.
no, please ask your question, Mark.
No, I was just what is the concern on a paper cup, and why implement so that does that mean Starbucks, for example, would need to charge 25 cents on every single drink they send out the door?
Yes.
Okay. To benefit what is it those paper cups are doing to the environment?
So the point is to encourage people to use reusable cups for those drinks and everything that they'd normally use in a single-use cupboard.
Okay. All right.
Again, this is not a given. We want your feedback on whether this is feasible or implementable or not.
Got it.
Okay. If there are no additional questions, thank you very much for your time today. Thank you for listening to me. I know I spoke a little bit too much, but again, please don't hesitate to contact me if you have any further questions, concerns, or thoughts on these regulations. And if you'd like to be part of that convening group who we're going to work with as we develop these regulations, we really would enjoy your participation in that group. So with that, I'll say goodbye and thank you very much.
Thank you, David.
Thank you, David. Thank you.